Hello there, and welcome back to the studio. At the beginning of 2024, we took a look at my favorite watercolor colors as an update to my top favorite series. I haven't made any major changes since then and still use her regularly as my main studio palette. So, with less to report there, it is time to update the rest of the series. I am working on an update to my top favorite brands video as well. However, that chunker of a video is going to take some time to be ready to share with you. While we wait for that, let's take a look at some of my other favorite supplies, such as watercolor paper, sketchbooks, brushes, and other studio staples. Let's start off with our most important watercolor supply, bar none, watercolor paper. I don't actually have a past video in the top favorite series for paper, and that is because it has been such an overwhelming, intimidating topic to cover. I have tried dozens of watercolor papers and have dozens more I've moved across the country and back that are still waiting for me to try them out. Your paper is your partner in the ongoing dance that is water control. It is a very personal decision based on preference, practice, and familiarity. Though I have tried many, I keep coming back to one, and that is Arch's 140-pound cold-pressed watercolor paper. Sometimes I wish I had a niche favorite that wasn't the same as everyone else's, but it is recommended often for a reason. That being said, it is also probably my favorite because it's what I use most often, as it is easily available and relatively affordable where I live, and therefore it is what I have the most experience with. Every time you use new paper, you're having to readjust for how it absorbs paint, what different pigments look like on it, and how fast or slow it dries. Often, when I try different papers, I get easily frustrated, or worse, I feel like I am failing on a particular piece without realizing why until I'm halfway in. So, over the years, I have let go of the idea of needing to try every option, and instead, I just paint on what feels good and what doesn't fight me. There are a few others that I do use regularly. For hot press paper, my favorite is Blick Premier 140 pound, and for the other papers, we should move on to my favorite watercolor sketchbooks. 4 years ago, I posted a detailed review comparing 6 watercolor sketchbooks. At the time, I reported that my favorite was the Etcher Everyday Sketchbook, though I hadn't yet tried Etcher's gray-covered watercolor sketchbook or Hanamule's 100% cotton. I am bummed to say that I have tried Hanamule's cotton now, and it really disappointed me, but after years of working in the Etcher Perfect sketchbook, I can confidently say it is my absolute favorite. It is rather expensive and seemingly getting more expensive by the day, so I use it less of a sketchbook and more as a place to paint watercolor studies. There's a big difference for me in terms of the headspace that I go into it with. It is a 100% cotton, cold pressed watercolor paper that handles exactly how I would expect any other high quality watercolor paper to handle. As I mentioned, different papers can change your entire painting experiences. So while I don't enjoy the price tag, saving up for one sketchbook that I love working in is way more fulfilling for me personally than having several sketchbooks that I don't enjoy at all. The honorable mention for both the watercolor paper and sketchbook goes to the Perfect Sketchbook Signature Series from Etcher, which uses Fabriano Artistico 140 pound, 100% cotton cold press paper. This is definitely my favorite pick if you are looking for a vegan watercolor paper option. So, what do I actually sketch in? For that, I turn to the Strathmore Softcover 500 Series Mixed Media Art Journal. I used to think that I hated sketching. However, through lots of trial and error, I learned that I do enjoy sketching. I was just using the wrong supplies. We'll talk more about the actual drawing materials shortly, but it turns out that having a mixed media sketchbook with paper that can handle water-soluble media was a complete game changer for this watercolor artist. This 100% cotton paper sketchbook doesn't excel at watercolor painting if you're using a lot of layers like I usually do, but it's wonderful for water-soluble graphite, water-soluble ink pencils, gouache, acrylic paint markers, and even simple watercolor washes. That, of course, is in addition to standard pencils, colored pencils, and ink. I love the soft touch cover that lets me fill it with stickers, and that it shows the wear and tear of its journey as my companion for whatever time I'm using it through. My honorable mention for a sketchbook is the Stillman & Byrne Nova series. I particularly like it for opaque mediums like colored pencils and gouache. While we're spending time in our casual sketchbook, let's talk about my favorite drawing tools before wrapping back around to the watercolor specific supplies like brushes. Currently, my favorite graphite pencil is a TK9400 clutch pencil from Faber-Castell, sporting a soft lead anywhere from 3B to 8B. It even has this teeny tiny little sharpener that is way too cute. I also love drawing with Prismacolor kohl erase pencils, which smear less than graphite, but they still erase, unlike other traditional color pencils. I don't tend to use color pencils the same way professional color pencil artists do for full, large scale drawings and paintings, but I do love me some chunky, bold drawings using the Prismacolor Premier Color pencils, especially in that tone sketchbook I mentioned earlier. I really came into my sketchbook era when I found the joy of water-soluble pencils and crayons. Much like the Strathmore 500 series sketchbook, these completely changed my relationship with drawing and boosted my confidence tenfold. As a watercolor artist, being able to use water and a paintbrush to create form and value in an otherwise ordinary sketch has brought me so much joy over this past year. In the interest of time, I'm going to move through these next items fairly quickly in the video, but if you'd like more information about each, you can visit the new page on my website with more information about all my favorites. My favorite water-soluble graphite pencils are the Faber-Castell Graphite Aquarelle. The darker, the better, so I usually reach for my 6B or 8B. And I absolutely adore the Lyra water-soluble graphite crayons for large and/or loose sketches. The Technolo RGB by Caran d'Ache is my favorite tinted graphite so far, and the Supercolor Soft by Caran d'Ache are my favorite water-soluble color pencils when it comes to sketching. I will happily use any of these drawing tools paired with a 1/2-inch synthetic flat brush for quick sketches on location. My favorite tip for sketching with water-soluble pencils is to dip them directly in water near the end of your painting in order to add strongly contrasting marks in areas of emphasis or shadow. The last one isn't quite as easy to grab as a pencil, but it's close. Art Graph Viarco tailor shape blocks activate like any other watercolor pan and can be painted with. My favorite color is what they call sepia, even though it looks a little bit like goethite, and it pairs well with any raw sienna-like colored pencil. While I was attending life drawing classes last year, I was able to fine-tune my essential miscellaneous drawing supplies. This bag was gifted to me by a dear friend. Thank you, Jenny. It is the Etcher Slate. I don't know that I could justify spending the money on it myself since I don't do a lot of art on location. But since I have it, I do take it with me anytime I leave the house for a sketching date. This is my longtime favorite Faber-Castell dust-free eraser, my slightly newer favorite Faber-Castell kneaded eraser, preferably with a carrying case so that it doesn't get overly dirty. I used to use kneaded erasers to just lift sketches that were intended to go underneath of watercolor paintings, but now I also use it for quick corrections when I'm sketching on location. My newest favorite in the eraser category are the Tombow Mono Zero erasers. Both the round and rectangular shapes work great for different applications. I wish this video was sponsored by them at this point, but it's not. This is a Faber-Castell manual sharpener. I shouldn't love this as much as I do, but I really appreciate the design. Due to the way that it folds, it can't accidentally open and get shavings all over my bag. And the Faber-Castell Click and Go water cup if I'm going to be using water-based media. There are lots of designs like this, but this one is very sturdy and collapses to about 1 inch tall. Around my studio, you're likely to find Blick masking tape in a variety of sizes. My favorites are this 1/8 inch for color charts, 1/2 inch for general taping needs, and 1 to 2 inches for securing watercolor paper to a harder surface. One of my favorite tools is my handy dandy Sunstar Katomaru corner cutter, which I use for rounding the edges of my sketchbooks and polishing off Patreon prints and mini paintings. I highly recommend a T-square ruler for quickly measuring charts or borders. I cannot believe it took me this long to actually buy one. My dull pencil sharpener can be a little finicky, but it brings pencils to a beautiful point. This date stamp for my sketchbook isn't at all necessary, but it does give me a nice little hit of dopamine after I finish a sketchbook page. And I like to use thrifted and or handmade vessels as tool holders. I have a sturdy little phone stand to hold reference images while I'm painting, and I use old Talente gelato cups for both my paint water and my wastewater collection. It recently occurred to me as well that I could crochet little cozies for the cups, especially for the wastewater one to make them less of an eyesore. And while I was at it, I also made them little matching paintbrush blotters because I had the scrap yarn and it was way too cute not to. Finally, I keep a jar of white opaque gouache from P.H. Martin's for highlights in my paintings. Finally, let's wrap up with some of my favorite brushes for both watercolor and gouache. My favorite brushes for gouache are the silver white line from Silver Brush made from synthetic Taclon. I mostly use sizes 6 and 10 bright, as well as the size 2 filbert for the smaller details. When I'm not in the mood for a flat brush, I reach for my Cotman 111 in a size 6 round. It was gifted to me by a patron many moons ago and has a nice rounded tip for some fun mark making. However, it is no secret that my favorite watercolor brushes are silver black velvets in the sizes 6 and 8 round. This squirrel and synthetic squirrel blend has incredibly soft fibers that are gentle when it comes to glazing colors, and the belly of the brush can hold noticeably more water than its fully synthetic counterparts. Its water capacity paired with a very fine point means that this brush can paint small details even better than the size 1 or 2 synthetic Taclons that I've used before, and it doesn't have to be loaded up anywhere near as often. I am often asked which brushes are best when it comes to environmental impact. I haven't found brush companies to be particularly transparent about their practices, so it's really hard to compare the impacts of farming natural hair versus the microplastic and plastic waste produced by manufacturing synthetic fibers, especially when cheap synthetic fibers are mass-produced and sold in large sets that most people don't fully utilize and end up just throwing away. All of that to say, I feel like the best brush that you can buy is the one that you will use most often and that will last the longest so that we can both reduce the demand and the amount of waste that comes from buying bulk cheap products. In my use case, as an example, the regular use, like 3 to 5 days a week, of a single silver black velvet can last me a couple of years before the tip becomes damaged and ideally it should be replaced. If we're using a very conservative 2-year lifespan, in reality, get more than that, but that $24 brush will end up costing me about 23 cents a week, which is something I can personally justify for my art practice, whether or not it's my livelihood or even if it were just a hobby. I know it can feel like we're getting less by buying a single brush rather than a value pack of 12, but a bit of reframing has really helped me over the past half a decade or so. Decluttering my belongings in general, and especially when it comes to art supplies, helps me to feel less overwhelmed, both in terms of the things I have to manage, as well as decisions I have to make while I'm actually in the creative process. Now, that's not to say that I don't have other brushes in my possession simply due to the nature of being a content creator. However, most I would not buy again, though there are still a few others aside from the silver black velvets that I really enjoy and would recommend. The Golden Natural Ultra Round size 12 is my favorite brush for painting whiskers and fine hairs. The longer bristles hold more water and paint than a synthetic of a similar size, which means that you can often paint many long hairs or whiskers without having to reload your brush. This is one brush load worth of paint from the Golden Natural size 12 compared to a silver black velvet of the size needed to create as equally fine lines. My favorite vegan watercolor brushes are the Da Vinci Casaneo size 6 round and the Jackson's Raven Quill 10/0. These two are exceptional synthetics that mimic the soft hair of the squirrel brushes that I like to use. They hold a lot of water and handle similarly to a silver black velvet size 8 round, though neither has as fine of a tip as the other brushes I've mentioned. The Raven holds more water, and when handled delicately, it can create finer details than the Casaneo, but I would consider it a floppier brush, so if you are looking for something with a little bit more spring, then turn to the Casaneo. The other brushes that you've seen me use regularly on the channel are the Jackson's half-inch Flat Studio Synthetic and the Princeton Velvet Touch size 4 flat shader. I prefer these stiffer Taklon brushes when it comes to swatching, as they don't waste as much paint as the softer brushes that I usually use for painting artwork. Every once in a while, I also get in the mood to paint watercolors using flat brushes, and these, along with the silver whites I mentioned earlier for gouache, are what I use. I have tried these silver black velvet flat brushes, and they're just not my preference for that type of style. So I think that will just about do it. These are my favorite supplies in the studio, sans watercolor brands, which we'll cover just as soon as I can make my way through all of them for an updated assessment. You can find links to all of these supplies on my website, along with even more information about each of them. There is a link in the description to make it nice and easy for you. If you're interested in the cormorant that I've been showing clips of throughout the video, he is the April Patreon print for the Happy Mail and Print Pal tiers. Thank you to my patrons for their unyielding support and for all of you who are watching. Until next time, my friends, happy painting.